Okay, it's me sitting here. Oh, there we go. All right. Because nothing happens until the music starts. That's the way this thing goes. Hey, everybody, I'm Kai Risdahl.
And I'm Molly Wood, and this is Make Me Smart.
Now it's my headphones that are too loud. It is the show where we are smart about tech and the economy and culture because none of us is as smart as all of us.
And the fun thing about our show is how we get to do shows about pretty much anything, and therefore we are able to hop directly from a conversation about socialism and its role in the 2020 presidential campaign, the Oscars, to today's topic, quantum computing.
Yay!
Boom! There are so many things to get smart about, you guys.
Yes.
I'm going to guess that a fair number of you don't know what I'm talking about when I say quantum computing. I'm going to guess I might
My hand is up.
be one of those
My
people.
hand is up.
Yeah.
My hand is up.
Yeah. Kai, is this true that you just were like, don't tell me anything?
Yes.
Not a
No,
thing?
this is one of those where I should go in cold and then have you and our expert of choice, who we will introduce momentarily, literally make me smart. See
He
what I
is
did
the
there?
stand-in
See what I did
for
there?
the audience. Yes, I do. So Kai's going to be our stand-in for the audience today as we attempt to learn about quantum computing, which our expert is going to correct me if I get any of this wrong. But essentially, a branch of physics and development in computing that will allow computers to operate by this totally different set of rules. So forget about sort of the binary, linear ones and zeros processing that we all know so much about in existing computer code. There's this metaphor that's been going around, which is that if you imagine a coin and you flip it, it comes up heads or tails, right? So that would be binary. It's either one or the other.
Gotcha.
But if you spin the coin, then while it's spinning, it is both heads and tails.
It's like Schrodinger's coin. Sorry. just
And
kidding.
that this is sort of a metaphor for how quantum computing operates, that I guess all of these states are present at the same time. What it ultimately means, and we're not going to hopefully we're not going to geek out too much on how it exactly works. What we really want to get to are the implications of incredibly complicated data that can be processed in fractions of the time that it takes modern day computers.
All right.
Kai, you're making noises.
Well, no, I want to climb right into this thing because I have so very many questions. Okay. So can we climb right in?
Yeah, we're going to skip everything else.
Yeah, we're going to skip everything else and we're going to get to Steven Weber. He is, oh my goodness, the computer guy. He teaches and studies at Berkeley at the School of Information there, and we got him on the phone. Steven, how are you?
I'm good. Good to be here.
So look, I'm going to start, and then all y'all climb in. And it goes like this. I just want to back up to something Molly said because we're not going to talk about how it works. I want to actually know. So quantum physics and quantum chemistry and all that stuff, right? That's like 18th level stuff. And you have to apply that to something that sits on my desktop because that's what I think of.
Kai, I don't think you're going to have a quantum computer sitting on your desktop anytime soon.
Well, then I'm out.
I'm really unfortunate to say. And, the funny thing is you don't need one either. But you know what you could have on your desktop that would be useful?
What?
Go to your bookshelf.
Yeah.
There's a book there that you never read. Remember Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking?
Oh,
I know you have it.
I do have it, and I read it. So
See?
Come
you read the whole
on.
thing.
I did read the whole thing. I loved it. It was awesome.
It's one of these books that everybody has on their bookshelf. Nobody reads past the page 5 because it's too hard to understand.
Yeah.
But you know what? Now you have to read it because this stuff is getting real. It's sort of like the way artificial intelligence and machine learning was like 5 years ago, and you wish you had learned more about it then, right? So that's why we should be talking about quantum computing today.
All right. So look, I hear that, and I have it. I take that on board. But really, I need you to at the outset front load it with why I have to care about this now. What is quantum computing going to do for me, as I'm some schmuck going to work 9 to 5 or 7 to 4 or whatever it is hours that I work. What difference is it going to make to me?
Or to you.
Yeah, to you. So think about it. Think about it the way your life changed when you moved. Remember how you used to use an abacus when you were in high school or something?
Or slide rule, maybe.
Nailed it.
Yeah,
Steve.
slide rule. Good.
Nailed it.
Perfect. So you used to use a slide rule, and now you use an iPhone. Did it change your life? Yeah, it changed your life.
Yes, but not necessarily
So-
for the better. I will point out. Just let me interject a parenthetical dark place point there.
We
Same.
can talk about that another time. I mean, I can't quite imagine social media on a slide rule, but if you think about the kind of jump of capabilities that went from the abacus to the iPhone, then you're talking about that kind of order of magnitude change when you're moving from conventional computing to quantum computing. Now, let's be clear. Like, there's a lot of things that people talk about quantum computing might be able to do that we actually don't know yet, because nobody has actually built a large enough working quantum computer. But think fast, like really fast, like orders of magnitude faster than what we can do today. So the classic example that people talk about is the ability to decrypt encrypted messages. It's really, really hard to do on a conventional computer. So hard that it would take like the rest of history to decrypt a message that's got a decent, like a long enough key.
Right.
Quantum computing probably could do it really fast.
Okay, so, all right, look, it actually turns out I have a whole bunch of questions, and I'm going to actually write down that first one there I have about quantum computing, but I mean about encryption. But back me up for a minute and give me the working person's version of how it works. What's the difference between quantum computing and
how close? Yeah, how close is the coin thing?
Yeah.
The coin thing is actually pretty close. So in a regular computer, you have lots of switches. They're either on or off, a 1 or a 0, right? In a quantum computer, you have far smaller number of switches, maybe 8, maybe 16 today if you're lucky. And they're in all those states at once. It's like a continuum of the head and the tails and everything in between. And if you can read that in a probabilistic fashion, like sort of know where that thing is at a given moment and read off it, then essentially you're able to encode and compute just orders of magnitude more information at the same time. And that's like, it's counterintuitive in that regard, because it's just hard to kind of grasp what that would look and feel like. But if you can think about like the infinite number of states that coin can be in, and you can read that information off it, that's what you're doing.
Okay, so let me get back to that. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I feel like part of what makes it interesting in the kind of quantum way is that in order to create these computers, you have to maintain those states, right? And then it has to be at like one of the coldest places in the universe, and like that's what makes it so hard. Is it's a very unstable physics situation.
Yeah, so think of it as like you have to make the hardware actually work. And that's an engineering problem. It's no longer like a basic science problem, but it's not trivial, and like everything has to go right. So Molly, you were at CES, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Did
I saw the IBM Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Wait. For the layperson in this conversation, what?
So IBM brings to CES what it calls a kind of demonstration quantum computer. I think it's called the Q System 1 or something like this.
Yeah.
But it was a mock-up. And I understand that it was beautifully encased in like kind of the glass thing that would make Steve Jobs really proud. But it wasn't the working quantum computer, because a working quantum computer has to be at like essentially 0 degrees Kelvin, the coldest place in the universe. And that's pretty hard to do. The issue is the qubits, the equivalent of bits in a computer, they will decohere if there's any disturbance at all. Somebody dropping a pin on the floor 2 blocks away, any temperature above, absolute 0. So that's like, it has to be completely isolated from the normal world in order to be able to do what it needs to do. And then it still doesn't work sometimes.
So we're still talking about Fantasyland a little bit, right?
Well, I mean, it's been demonstrated.
It's been demonstrated, right? But we can get things to absolute 0, but we can't, it's not an immediate real object, right?
Well, there are some projects. There's one at Google. There's one at Microsoft. There's one at IBM, of course. And they've got 6, 8, sometimes up to 16 qubits working for periods of time. The issue is, like in a regular computer, errors get introduced as the machine runs. And in a quantum computer, lots and lots and lots of errors get introduced because these tiny little perturbations. So the real challenge is it going to actually take more computing power to correct the errors that get introduced than the machine will actually have itself? Nobody really knows yet how high this can go.
Okay, so let me back you up for a minute to that thing that either you or Molly said a minute ago, which is basically to make a supercomputer work, everything has to go right, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Here's my corollary. Once we get quantum computing going, what could possibly go wrong? Right? Because I mean, come on, let's get to the encryption thing. If this thing, these quantum computers can break encryption that is in theory right now uncrackable, then every possible aspect of security goes away. Forget my bank account. Think about the
Yes.
nuclear codes.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Is nobody taken aback by this?
Many people are
Okay,
taken
good.
aback by it. I mean, to the point where actually for a few years now, the NSA, NIST, and other kind of three-letter agencies have been figuring out what they call quantum-resistant encryption or quantum-proof encryption. So it is possible to encrypt data in a way that a quantum computer wouldn't be able to decrypt. The problem is, like, you've got this huge installed base of current RSA-style encryption, and turning that whole installed base over
Right.
to replace it with quantum-proof, it would be the equivalent of, like, turning over the world's entire fleet of gasoline-powered cars into electric cars. I mean, you can do it, but it's going to take years, decades, and it's going to be super expensive.
Yeah.
So there's going to be this period of time where people can break encryption, and not everybody will know who those people are, and not everybody will have access to quantum-proof encryption. So think about all the things you just said. Now think about that from the perspective of a drug cartel.
Well, yeah,
Or think about it from the perspective of a foreign government.
this seems like one of those things that's just because you can do it doesn't mean you oughta.
Except that you're going to have to.
Because
It
why?
seems like, right?
Because why?
Because everybody else is doing it.
Well, yeah. So get me the geopolitics here.
Right, exactly. And that's
Yeah.
where things get really interesting, right, Steve? And this is your jam also.
Yeah, you probably heard that we're in a bit of a race with the Chinese around some of these issues.
Right.
People talk about machine, but the Chinese have already demonstrated the ability to do quantum communication from a satellite down to a base station on Earth.
Wow,
And
have
the
we?
cool thing about that is,
Have we?
if you're doing that kind of quantum communication, nobody can tap into it. Any perturbation, anybody who sort of listens in, essentially decoheres the quantum stream, so that you would know if someone was tapped into that line of communication.
Okay.
So Chinese are doing it,
wow.
we're doing it, lots of other people are going to do it too. You don't want to fall behind. It's that kind of a dynamic.
Wait, have we accomplished that satellite communication, the quantum satellite communication specifically?
Not
or do we not
in
know?
the public domain.
They're not-
Not that I know of.
They're not
that I know
Yeah.
of. Yeah.
I mean, we should say here, this is one of the rare areas where the president signed an initiative around this, the National Quantum Initiative Act, that actually calls for money, right? It's not just a public-private partnership. It is a $1.2 billion investment in quantum information science.
Yeah, well, $1.2 billion starts to feel like real money, but the Chinese have put, some people think, $3 to $5 to $7 billion into it in the last couple of years. So, again, it's a competition. Even the EU is putting money behind quantum science. I mean, everybody's sort of jumping on the bandwagon now as it becomes pretty clear to people that, it's not science fiction, and it's probably not a decade away. It's probably 3 or 4 years
Really?
away. So we're racing to catch up.
So what happens if, forget the American government, the Chinese government, or the Europeans, what happens if, like, Google figures this out? Or, heaven forfend, Mark Zuckerberg?
Heaven
Right?
forfend.
Can you imagine Zuckerberg with quantum computing?
Talk about the
saying.
end of privacy.
I'm just saying.
Woo!
I can sort of imagine it, but I'm not sure that I want to. Yeah. So here's the thing. I think we've all become accustomed, particularly, living up here in the Bay Area, you've become accustomed to the idea that these technologies get developed in the private sector, they belong to the private sector, they belong to consumers, and then somehow they get spun off into military applications. This could turn that upside down. I'm not saying it will, but I'm saying it could, in the sense that this kind of technology would give such advantage to a government that had it when other governments didn't, that I just wonder whether or not it's going to end up at some stage a little bit more like the atomic bomb, where governments decided they didn't want that technology floating out there in the private sector for individuals to use or for companies to develop on their own. Now, I know there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to say, that's insane. There's no way that this technology could be renationalized. But, I wouldn't bet 100% sure on that. I mean, if you had enough money and you had enough laws and enough regulation, you could probably bring that technology back inside the Pentagon.
Wow. So, like, if the corollary is the conversations that we're having about 5G, where we keep hearing these noises vaguely connected to the Trump administration that they might want to nationalize a 5G network because it is, in fact, considered so imperative economically and in terms of security, that idea goes to 11 when quantum computing is involved?
Yeah, it could. I mean, think of it as like, you have a baseline infrastructure, and if you control that quantum computing infrastructure, remember I said you're not going to have one of these things on your desk. You might be able to access it over the internet, quantum as a service, if you want to call it that. But the service provider gets to decide what the user can do and what the user can't do. So let's say I'm a drug company, and I want to use some of this quantum computing capacity to do something that drug companies really, really want to do, which is to figure out how it is that proteins fold into a three-dimensional shape, because that would be just great for drug development. So you might be able to access the quantum capability to do that. But if you tried to, like, late at night, kind of get in there and decide you're going to use it to decrypt the email messages from your competitor to Moscow or something like that, maybe not so much.
All right, so so let me cross the streams here for a minute on something else Molly and I have talked about, right? This is the quantum analogy of net neutrality, right?
I guess.
Information
Help me
wants
understand
to
what you
be
mean by that
free, man. Right?
Oh.
The internet's there. We got to let all the information go on the internet. But oh no, wait.
Yeah.
Quantum stuff? No. You
Oh,
can't
I
use it for
see.
that. You can use it for the other thing.
Like, will there essentially be
Yeah.
throttling, like the
Right.
full power of the Q
Quantum
cloud?
throttling.
Let's say we should
Yes, the Q
trademark that
cloud.
right now.
I'm
by the way, the
dropping
Q
my
cloud,
mic right here. That's all I'm saying.
the full power
The
of the Q
throttling-
cloud, perhaps should not be
Yeah.
available to the normals.
Well, I don't see it so much as an ideological thing. It's just the way governments deal with these kinds of capabilities that could really change the game for militaries. Like, you have a quantum computer. You know those submarines that are on the ocean floor? Kai, I think you flew planes, not submarines,
I was
right?
not a submarine guy, no.
Okay, so imagine yourself as a submarine guy, and you're
Okay, first of
sitting
all,
there and you
no,
think
but go ahead.
you think you're undetectable. And you're undetectable because there's no signal coming up from that submarine that a normal sonar can actually measure. But a quantum metrology system, if you want to use that word, which is fancy for measurement,
Yeah.
can measure really small disturbances in the gravitational field of the Earth. So if the U.S. has a quantum computer and it wants to look for Russian submarines, say, that you can't find with sonar, could you find them with quantum? Maybe you could.
Well, I have a question about power. So if you want to stay on this sort of geopolitical problem topic, stay there for a minute, and then I'll come back to my question.
No, well, all I was going to say is fundamentally we're all walking around naked if quantum computing takes off. Metaphorically, right? There are no secrets.
Well, look, I live in Berkeley, so I feel like we're all walking around naked anyway. But
That's a whole different show, man.
yes, and here's the interesting thing. I want you to imagine this. So I have to believe that there are government agencies that have lots and lots and lots of stored up data from the last 20 years that they've been kind of just putting on a hard drive somewhere. All of Vladimir Putin's emails and his texts and all that kind of thing.
It's all in the warehouse from Raiders, yeah.
Yeah, they're encrypted. But what if you could decrypt them today?
Right.
Go backwards in time and decrypt all that stuff that was sent 20 years ago. It'd be kind of interesting. Write some pretty good books about that.
Yep.
Well, and then I would imagine too that just as even in artificial intelligence and machine learning, that one of the biggest problems is the sheer volume of data, and that could even apply to things
Yes.
like climate modeling, like so many secrets, but then also so many sort of scary predictions feel like they could be made by computers. I mean, it just is. It's hard to, like, once you start going to down the rabbit hole of potential change, it's hard to like stop.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we're in the middle of trying to figure out what we can do with machine learning and conventional computers, and we're running into some limits in terms of the size of the data sets and the billions of experiments you can run on them. It's likely, nobody really knows yet, okay, but it's likely that all of that would accelerate substantially if you could do it in a quantum architecture. Not certain, because it may be that actually quantum turns out to be not so good for that kind of a problem. But if you think about the kind of slowing or gradual roadblocks that are people running into with machine learning, maybe quantum is the key that unlocks the next generation of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Maybe it's the thing that finally creates artificial generalized intelligence where, the computer wakes up and gets your joke. I don't think we know.
Or it's the end of days.
Or it's the end of days. Could
Kai
be.
always goes to end of days. Speaking of the end of days, I have a question about power and electricity, and this is sort of a listener question because we did a story a couple of weeks ago on Marketplace Tech about data centers, and
Yes.
the electricity consumption of data centers and the sheer size of them. And someone said, oh, well, once we move to quantum, a data center will be like a 4x4 cube. And then we were sort of riffing about, well, yeah, but that 4x4 cube has to be kept at 460 degrees below zero. Like what starts to be the energy implication there? Do we have any idea yet?
It's a really good question, and I honestly don't know. I feel like,
Me neither.
we got simpler problems with like cryptocurrency mining burnt off as much energy as the entire like renewables sector in the world last year. So maybe, we ought to tackle some of those problems first before we worry about quantum computing and energy consumption. But the data centers,
Okay,
look, I mean,
fine.
you keep them pretty cool if you keep them in places like Iceland and Greenland. But, it's really, really cold in the heart of a quantum computer. And that means liquid helium. And liquid helium is expensive and rare and all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, everything has to go right. It's not a simple problem. It's an engineering challenge, but like on an order of magnitude, maybe more complicated than people who were heading up to Los Alamos in 1943.
Steve Weber is the faculty director for the Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity at Berkeley School of Information. Steve, that is an awesome title. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate it. So listen, send us your thoughts about quantum computing, and frankly, whether you're terrified or not. Just not to prejudge your answers. I'm just saying. Make me smart at marketplace.org is where you can send them. Make it a voicemail. We'll get you on the podcast.